In the peaceful town of Maplewood, the disappearance of Claire Whitman, a bright university student with a love for nature, shattered the illusion of safety. Her best friend Emily Parker became the first to notice something no one else had seen: a strange figure lurking in the background of Claire's final photograph. That blurred image would lead detectives to Thomas Garrison, a drifter with a disturbing obsession and a hidden collection of stolen photographs. Alongside them were Claire's grieving parents, Michael and Sarah Whitman, who never stopped searching for answers, and the investigators who pieced the puzzle together detail by detail. What began as a missing persons case evolved into a chilling tale of obsession, deception, and tragedy. And at the center of it all was one haunting image. Because sometimes the smallest detail in a single photo can unravel the darkest of mysteries. In the quiet town of Maplewood, life often moved at a gentle, unhurried pace. It was the kind of place where neighbors waved at each other from their porches, children rode their bicycles down empty streets until dusk, and shopkeepers greeted customers by name. The police department dealt mostly with small disputes or the occasional burglary, nothing that would ever make the headlines. People trusted one another, and there was a sense of safety woven into the daily rhythm of the community. That is why, when Claire Whitman disappeared, it felt as though the town had been shaken awake from a dream. Claire was 24, a bright university student with plans that stretched far beyond Maplewood. She studied environmental science, often spending hours in the woods cataloging plants and taking photos of wildlife. Friends described her as adventurous but careful, someone who loved exploring but always told someone where she was going. On the day she vanished, she had been to class in the morning and then told her roommate she planned to take a short hike before heading home. She drove her small silver car to the edge of the Maplewood Trail, parked and walked into the forest. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. When she didn't come home that evening, her family immediately knew something was wrong. Claire was punctual, reliable, and deeply close with her parents. She would never have stayed out without letting someone know. By nightfall, calls were made to the police and the search began almost instantly. Officers found her car parked neatly at the trail entrance, keys missing and no signs of struggle. Volunteers gathered with flashlights, calling her name as they combed the dense woods. Helicopters hovered overhead with searchlights sweeping across the treetops. For 3 days, the search continued without pause, and yet nothing emerged. No phone, no clothing, not a single trace of where she had gone. As days turned into weeks, hope began to erode. Posters with Claire's smiling face were taped to lampposts, bulletin boards, and grocery store doors. Her parents stood outside the town hall, begging for any information. News outlets from nearby cities picked up the story, showing footage of the search parties and interviews with tearful friends. The town that had once felt so safe now seemed heavy with fear. Parents no longer let their children play outside alone, and strangers were viewed with suspicion. People whispered theories in cafes and grocery aisles, but the truth was that no one knew anything. For a while, it seemed as though Claire's case would fade into the growing list of unsolved mysteries. Detectives followed every lead they could, but none of them led anywhere. Even with the community watching and waiting, there was no breakthrough. The trail she had walked seemed to have swallowed her whole, and the woods kept their silence. Yet deep in her best friend's phone, hidden among dozens of carefree snapshots, was a single photograph that would change everything. At the time, no one knew it existed. At the time, the town could only grieve and wonder. But that photo was waiting, and it held the key. Emily had been Claire's closest friend since childhood. They had shared secrets, traded books, and filled their phones with countless photos of each other. After Claire's disappearance, Emily couldn't sleep. Nights were long and heavy with dread, and she often found herself scrolling through her gallery, staring at pictures of her friend as if she could somehow bring her back by looking long enough. One night, nearly a month after Claire had gone missing, Emily noticed an image she didn't remember taking. It was buried deep among their usual snapshots, tucked between group selfies and campus shots. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, just Claire standing at the trailhead on the day she vanished. She was smiling at the camera, sunlight falling on her face, her backpack straps pulled tightly over her shoulders. It looked like the kind of picture two friends might have taken to mark the start of a simple afternoon hike. But Emily felt uneasy. Something about the photo pulled her in. She zoomed closer, studying the background. At first it was only trees, their branches stretching like dark fingers behind Claire's bright figure. Then her eyes caught something else, a faint shape among the shadows. A man, blurry, almost hidden but undeniably there. He wasn't walking or moving. He was standing still. His posture was strange, rigid, as though he had been caught mid-watch. His face was not clear, but the outline of his head, his jacket, and the set of his shoulders made it obvious this was no trick of light or random tree formation. Someone had been behind Claire watching as the picture was taken. The discovery left Emily trembling. She replayed the moment in her mind, but she had no memory of anyone nearby that day. They had laughed, joked, and Claire had asked her to snap the picture quickly before they continued walking. Emily could not remember ever noticing a stranger in the background. Had he been there the whole time, blending in with the trees? And if so, why had he been standing so still, as if waiting for something? Emily sent the photo to the police immediately. At first, investigators assumed it was nothing more than another hiker, perhaps accidentally caught in the frame. But when the photo was examined and digitally enhanced, the details became clearer. The man wasn't strolling down the trail or passing by with his own gear. He had no backpack, no water bottle, no sign that he belonged in the woods for any normal reason. His body was angled toward Claire, his head turned slightly in her direction as if his entire focus had been on her. The unsettling nature of the photo reignited the case. Detectives began to question whether Claire's disappearance had been random at all. This single image suggested the presence of someone deliberately watching her, someone who might have followed her deeper into the woods. For the first time in weeks, investigators felt they had a lead worth pursuing. What had seemed like a frozen, innocent moment captured by friends now looked like the beginning of something far darker. Detectives knew they could no longer treat the photograph as coincidence. The man captured in the background of Claire's final picture was not just another face lost in the blur of memory. He was now a figure of interest. With renewed urgency, investigators returned to the trail where the photo had been taken. They brought with them forensic teams, dogs, and search experts, determined to trace any sign of his presence. The ground had been disturbed by weeks of searching, but careful study revealed something previously overlooked. A set of heavy boot prints led away from the main path, deeper into the forest. Unlike the faint tracks of hikers, these were pressed hard into the dirt, as if the man had been carrying weight or moving with determination. Following the prints, searchers came across a torn scrap of fabric snagged on a low branch. It was dark, coarse, and weather-worn, clearly not a piece of Claire's bright hiking clothes. Investigators collected it for analysis, but its placement raised immediate suspicion. Whoever had been there had moved off trail, cutting through rough brush that no casual hiker would willingly enter. It suggested purpose, and it pointed toward pursuit. Witnesses were re-interviewed. Several people who had been on the trail that day were asked to recall every detail. Most remembered nothing unusual. But one hiker, a middle-aged man who had been with his wife, hesitated before adding something new. He remembered seeing someone sitting alone on a fallen log, off to the side of the trail. The figure hadn't been moving, hadn't greeted them, hadn't even seemed like a typical hiker. He had just sat there staring as others passed by. When pressed, the witness described a man in a dark jacket, rough in appearance, carrying no bag or equipment. At the time, it had seemed odd, but not alarming. Now, combined with the photo, it painted a disturbing picture. The enhanced image was released to the public. News outlets spread it quickly, and within days, the police tip line was overwhelmed. Dozens of callers claimed they recognized the man. Many mentioned a drifter who had been seen around Maplewood in recent months, someone who lingered near bus stops or walked along the edges of town. His name surfaced repeatedly, Thomas Garrison. He was known for strange behavior, sometimes muttering to himself, sometimes watching people without saying a word. Police records revealed minor infractions, trespassing, petty theft, but nothing violent on record. Still, his presence in town and sudden disappearance around the time Claire went missing was impossible to ignore. Detectives began piecing together his movements. Garrison had no permanent address but was rumored to have stayed in abandoned buildings on the outskirts of Maplewood. Locals remembered him loitering in diners, paying for meals with crumpled bills and vanishing before anyone could question him too closely. He drifted like smoke through the town, but the photo had pinned him in one place at one moment, standing behind Claire. For the first time, investigators had a name, a face, and a direction. The mystery was beginning to take shape. though what it revealed was far more disturbing than anyone had expected. Detectives widened their search for Thomas Garrison, following every lead that pointed to his movements after Claire's disappearance. Patrols canvassed the outskirts of Maplewood, checking abandoned houses, barns, and sheds where drifters were known to sleep. One tip led them to a derelict farmhouse hidden behind overgrown fields, a place no one had lived in for decades. The front door was cracked and weeds curled up through the porch boards. Investigators entered cautiously, their flashlights sweeping across dust, broken furniture, and silence. At first, it seemed like just another forgotten property. Then one officer noticed a backpack shoved into a corner. It was Claire's. Inside were her notebooks, a half-empty water bottle, and her phone charger. The discovery sent a chill through the team. Claire had never left the woods willingly. Someone had taken her belongings here. The farmhouse quickly became a crime scene, and forensic specialists combed every inch. Fingerprints were smudged across surfaces, partial but enough to compare. They matched Thomas Garrison. Further searches uncovered something even darker. Under a loose floorboard, hidden in a small compartment, officers found stacks of Polaroid photos. They were unsettling in their ordinariness. Women walking down streets, waiting for buses, drinking coffee at outdoor tables. None of them seemed aware they were being photographed. Each picture felt invasive, a silent theft of private moments. Some of the women were recognizable as Maplewood locals. Others were strangers, perhaps photographed in nearby towns. The sheer number revealed a disturbing obsession that had stretched on for years. Among the pile was a single photograph that stopped investigators cold. It was the same image Emily had found in her gallery, the one showing Claire smiling at the trailhead with a blurred man in the background. But this print was different. It wasn't casual or accidental. It was zoomed in, cropped so the central focus wasn't Claire's cheerful expression but her body, framed almost like a possession. Even worse, the background figure was sharper here. The man was undeniably Thomas Garrison, his face partially visible, his eyes fixed on Claire. The revelation overturned everything Emily thought she knew. The picture on her phone hadn't come from her camera at all. Somehow, Garrison had inserted the photo into her gallery, planting it as though leaving a calling card. Investigators believed he had accessed her cloud storage or hacked her account in some crude but deliberate way. The photograph wasn't just evidence of his presence, it was proof of his intent. He wanted someone to see it eventually, wanted his act of watching to be recognized. The farmhouse yielded more signs of his obsession. Notebooks filled with rambling words described the thrill of following people unnoticed. Lines scrawled across the pages spoke of choosing the right one and waiting for the moment they are alone. Claire had been chosen. She had walked into the woods that day unaware that someone was already watching, already planning. The discovery cemented Thomas Garrison as the prime suspect. What had begun as a missing person case now carried the full weight of a predator's pattern. The photo that had seemed innocent at first had become the central thread, tying every dark piece of the puzzle together. But there was still one question no evidence could yet answer. Where was Claire? The investigation shifted into its final and most urgent stage. Detectives knew that finding Claire was no longer about hope, but about uncovering the truth of what Thomas Garrison had done. With the farmhouse secured, search teams spread outward across the property. Cadaver dogs were brought in, moving carefully through the fields and woodlands that surrounded the crumbling building. Hours passed with no results until one of the dogs alerted near a shallow patch of disturbed soil, a few hundred yards behind the barn. The ground was soft, covered hastily with leaves and branches. When officers began to dig, they uncovered the heartbreaking evidence everyone feared. Buried only a few feet beneath the surface was Claire's body. The scene was grim, but it provided the closure her family and the town had been desperate for. Forensic analysis later revealed that she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, likely from being struck from behind. There were no signs of prolonged struggle, which suggested she had been ambushed quickly and efficiently. Investigators concluded that Garrison had followed her from the trail, taken his chance when she was alone, and then transported her body to the farmhouse where he left her belongings. The discovery was devastating, but it also solidified the case against him. As news spread, Maplewood was shaken once again. The town that once felt untouchable was now scarred by the knowledge that a predator had lived among them. People who had dismissed Garrison as a harmless drifter now realized he had been studying them, photographing them and waiting for opportunities. Fear was replaced by outrage, and pressure mounted on law enforcement to find him before he could vanish for good. That chance came weeks later in a neighboring state. Garrison had been spotted attempting to steal food from a convenience store. When confronted, he tried to run but was quickly caught. His appearance matched the enhanced photo perfectly, the same gaunt face, the same jacket described by witnesses. Once in custody, investigators laid the evidence before him. Faced with fingerprints, photographs, and Claire's belongings in his possession, he had little ground to stand on. Eventually, he admitted to following her, admitted to taking her photograph, and admitted to striking her down when no one else was near. His journals, his Polaroid collection, and his confession painted a chilling portrait of a man who had blurred the line between watching and acting. The final piece of the puzzle returned to the photo itself. What began as a casual snapshot had transformed into the most crucial evidence of the case. Without Emily noticing that small, blurred figure in the background, detectives might never have connected Garrison to Claire. The photograph had not only captured her final moments of freedom, but had also caught her killer in the act of watching. It was proof hidden in plain sight, a silent witness that refused to be ignored. When the trial began, the image was shown repeatedly to the jury. Claire's smile contrasted with the shadowy figure behind her, a haunting reminder of how quickly safety can dissolve into danger. The jury returned a swift verdict, and Thomas Garrison was sentenced to life without parole. For Maplewood, the resolution brought a measure of peace, but also a lasting unease. Parents watched their children more closely, neighbors locked their doors at night, and hikers no longer walked the trails alone. Claire's family grieved, but they also found strength in knowing that her final photograph had helped bring justice. The case became a cautionary tale told far beyond the town's borders. The story of Claire Whitman and the photo that exposed her stalker continues to be remembered. It is a reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, and that sometimes the smallest detail, a blur in the background, a figure almost forgotten, can hold the key to the entire mystery.